The biggest name in the sport, and over the last several years, eased back into the spotlight at yesterday's team presentation in Pamplona. Steve Schlanger with Todd Gogulski, and Contador looks like a man ready to ride a bike.
His team, Saxo Bank Tinkoff Bank, very happy to have him back in the lineup after not racing with him for the past 6 months due to that suspension, and they've come to this race for him to win it.
Start of the team time trial. This is live in Pamplona on this first of 21 stages of the 67th edition of the Vuelta a Espana. Alberto Contador's Saxo Bank squad will be the second to last of 22 teams to start today. Caja Rural is the first team to go off. Just past 7 p.m. local time right now in Spain. Caja Rural will be followed by Ulrika Greenedge and then Garmin Sharp. The first 3 teams and all 22 teams starting in 4-minute intervals. So in this city known for the running of the bulls, they're off on the bikes. A 16.5K team time trial kickstarting the 67th Vuelta a Espana. The final Grand Tour of the season is now underway here on Universal Sports. This is the second of our 22 teams on this Stage 1 team time trial. On the first day of the Vuelta a Espana, Ulrika Greenedge coming off a team time trial win recently at the Eneco Tour. And this distance today similar to the one they won on at the Eneco Tour. 16.5 kilometers, and now 2 teams on course here in Pamplona today. And this is just the first 21 stages of racing. Let's show you what things look like this year for the Vuelta a Espana. Very unique in that the entirety of the race takes place in northern Spain, all 2,088 miles.
And it'll still be hot for the guys as the first day here, Stage 1 in Pamplona. Then they move into their first mountain summit finish, Arate, stage number 3. Contador has won there before.
And what you'll notice is that the climbs are not stacked in the back half of the race. The summit finishes start early on in week 1. Stage number 8 is also a big climbing stage. They're really interspersed evenly throughout the 3 weeks of competition.
This is one of those races where not only do they have those big climbs, but they have that giant transfer to stage 10. Stage 11 is the only individual time trial, about 25 miles in length. Then stages 13, 14, and 15. Big summit finishes back to back to back. Most of the riders think that will be the most selective of the entire race.
They feel that those 3 consecutive summit finishes could decide the overall general classification, but still after that you have some more summit finishes, some more significant climbing, and an iconic climb, the Bola del Mundo, on the final weekend.
And it's iconic after only being used once before back in 2010 when Nibali barely hold on to his overall win there. And it will certainly be a factor again this year.
Check out these numbers. 8 mountain stages, 36 mountain passes, 10 summit finishes. So it really plays into the hands of the climbers. Not a lot of emphasis placed on time trialing. We just have the 1 team time trial today and then the short individual time trial coming up midway through the race. As we're out on the road, the green, white, and blue team is Ulrika Greenedge, a team that's really brought a nice blend of youth and experience to this year's race.
And this is actually one of the teams that I think has a shot at a podium today. It's a very interesting team time trial because these teams are so stacked with guys for the mountains that they don't have a lot of depth for the time trial days. And so it's very hard to pick a true favorite for this team time trial on day number 1.
All working in concert with one another. The time at the end of the stage is taken on the 5th rider across the line. So each team has 9 riders apiece. You can afford to lose a few along the way, but you have to finish with at least 5 for the first few guys on a team to get the top time. So on the left-hand side, we have Ulrika Greenedge. They started 4 minutes behind Caja Rural, the team on the right that is in the white. Coming up next, it'll be Garmin Sharp. And the team time trial, not a discipline that teams are afforded the luxury of practicing throughout the course of a season all that much. And then you come to the Vuelta, where it's kind of a hodgepodge of riders for various teams. So you're often dealing with a group of riders who don't often ride together. Now they have to ride in a discipline that requires so much precision. Not easy to pull off. Now, this is back at the start. Garmin Sharp The team that is led by the American Andrew Talansky, one of only 4 Americans in the Vuelta field this year.
Talansky looking to see what he can get done in this 3rd Grand Tour of the season. He's a guy who has definitely shown in week-long stage races in his career, but this is his big chance to do it on a bigger world stage in Spain.
Talansky made his Grand Tour debut here at the Vuelta a year ago. Finished just inside the top 80, but that was all about getting experience. This year, it's about leading this Garmin Sharp team. And coming off a win recently at the Tour de l'Ain, first big European win for Talansky, so his confidence is sky high.
He's very much focused on a good general classification ride. Remember, 9 guys per team, and you'll notice how as they get started, they get into that formation as quickly as possible to draft off of each other, really keep the speed up. Once again, back to Orica Green Edge here. This is a squad that, as you were saying a moment ago, they don't get a lot of chance to do team time trials together. They don't actually train in this discipline very often, but this is one of the squads, just like Garmin Sharp, who has put an emphasis on the team time trial.
Fairly wide streets on the first part of this course, and then it gets tight and technical near the end with some cobblestones thrown in. Riders starting today in the Plaza del Castillo and then finishing in the bull ring in Pamplona, made famous by the running of the bulls.
And those cobblestones on a time trial bike in a team time trial, very tricky for these guys to navigate the corners and get jostled around while still being as aerodynamic as possible. So that definitely is something the riders tend to not enjoy very much.
This is the 3rd consecutive year in which the Vuelta has used a team time trial for the opening stage of the race.
It's a beautiful discipline in road racing. It's also the hardest thing to execute in road racing. Some people will say that maybe a lead out for a field sprint is technically more difficult, and it kind of goes either way, but that and the team time trial both very tough to do well.
Again, this is the first team on the course, Caja Rural, starting 4 minutes ahead of Orica Green Edge, and then the Green Edge squad 4 minutes ahead of Garmin Sharp. We have 3 teams of the 22 that are scheduled to start out on course right now. Summertime holidays in Spain. Warm day, temperature over 100 degrees. By staying out of southern Spain, they thought they were going to escape the brutal heat, but I don't know. Over 100 still seems pretty hot to me. Go.
Yeah, it's hot the last time you check the thermometer, and this looks like a man either getting dropped or getting a little service. Sorry for the breakup there. It's sometimes a challenge when the stadium is the countryside.
Now, this is Garmin Sharp. Everyone's still together, all 9 riders here. And this is a team typically that's very good at this discipline. Now, all of their top team time trial riders that are on their roster aren't here at the Vuelta, but still, they know how to ride this TTT.
Yeah, there's no doubt this is a team that's put focus on the team time trial. It's been a discipline that they've had some of the biggest wins in the team's history in, dating back to the 2008 Giro d'Italia, where they won that and put Christian Vande Velde in the pink jersey as the overall leader. They've won a lot of team time trials this year already, and they'd certainly like to pick this one up as well.
Plaza del Castillo framing the start in Pamplona for today's team time trial to kick off the Vuelta. And next up, it is BMC, the team of Philippe Gilbert, who last year led the World Tour with 18 wins, but still looking for his first win of 2012 as he arrives at the final Grand Tour of the season. Quite a stark contrast, 2011 to 2012 for Philippe Gilbert.
Yeah, he blames that on being so marked. This is Alessandro Ballan here. But let's be honest, if his form was as good as it was last year, he would have won a race by this point this season. That's Philippe Gilbert I'm speaking about. He just has not been able to put it together this year.
What's been the biggest problem, do you think, for him?
It's just been all kinds of stuff for him. Sometimes a guy can't get it in order. Now the BMC team rolls off. Notice how the man on the right leads him down the ramp. Everybody falls into position right away. They want to get up to about 30 miles an hour as quickly as possible.
And one of the 4 Americans in the Vuelta, also on this BMC team, Brent Bookwalter. Among the 9 men now out on course for BMC. Altogether, we have 4 teams on course, just underway here from the Vuelta. We come back to Orica Green Edge. They are on the left. Garmin Sharp is on the right. We now have 4 teams out on course. 22 scheduled to start. BMC, the most recent team, will roll down the start ramp. Still waiting for our first team to finish. Caja Rural was the first team out on course just past 7 p.m. local time in Spain today. And now back to the start for the Liquigas team. Squad number 5, and Liquigas, a team that has finished team time trial each of the last 2 years.
It's an interesting squad for Liquigas, actually. I think they don't have nearly as strong a general classification contender this year as we typically see them sending to the Vuelta, and I think they're going to have to search more for stages than top general classification.
This is the 20th time that Pamplona has hosted a stage start of the Vuelta a Espana, but it's been a while. Last time was almost 20 years ago, back in 1994. They've been hungry for it to come back, and now here we are in 2012. Start and finish of today's Stage 1 Team Time Trial.
This stage only 16.5 kilometers. It's about 10.25 miles. Does have some punchy little hills late, one in the last kilometer that's kind of steep, as well as those cobblestones you've already talked about, Steve. But for the most part, fairly straightforward team time trial course, except for the last part.
And because it's not that long, you're not going to see a lot of big time gaps. Among the top riders, guys we've highlighted like Contador and Froome, Joaquin Rodriguez also in the race, what would you expect to be the separation amongst those guys on the GC?
Oh, those top guys, if it's more than 30 seconds, it'd be a little bit surprising. Certainly it could happen if a team has a really off day, or if their leader has a mechanical and the team has to wait or something. But barring something bad, if it's more than 30 seconds, I'd be surprised.
Now, Caja Rural has lost 1 rider out on the road. They're down to 8. And the top teams with some of those high-profile riders that we highlighted will be starting at the back of the field. Sky with Chris Froome will be the 3rd to last team out. Saxo Bank will follow them with Alberto Contador. And then the final team today is that of the defending champion, JJ Cobo of Movistar, who, again, is showing his inconsistency after winning the Vuelta last year. He's been totally off the map this year for the most part, and says that he's not really on his best form coming into his Vuelta defense because primarily he's been bothered by an infected wisdom tooth. Yeah, so he's behind on his training.
Yeah, he said he had to take 10 days off the bike after the tour. He said it was extremely painful, and so he's kind of playing down his chances. But I honestly think that that's good for him to play down his chances, because he's been a guy who's never really done well in the limelight and the pressure. And so hopefully he's got something in reserve that he just isn't talking about.
So Garmin Sharp at the intermediate time check, 8K in, with the best time by just a second over Orica Green Edge. Caja Rural half a minute off the pace. This is Caja Rural in the white and red, and this is one of those Spanish teams in their home race that is going to be really looking for stage opportunities, and now they go uphill inside the final kilometer. So they'll be stage hunting, looking for breakaways, and now down to 7 riders here as they lose another.
That's the way it works in the team time trial. It comes from the time of the 5th guy for the guys in front of him. So the man who is just on the front takes a big hard pull, knows he's going to put everything into it, and then get dropped by his teammates up this climb. Also, you notice the roads, just how tough it is with all these corners to get your team organized and to be able to trade pace and really keep it smooth and fluid. But these cobblestones, really tough on a climb on a time trial bike like this.
This is where they lead the bulls into the bull ring every July in the San Fermin Festival. Dates all the way back to the early 1920s. And today the riders coming into that same legendary bull ring. Caja Rural has lost a few along the way, but they're going to finish with at least the minimum of 5, and that's what you have to do. Time is taken on the 5th rider across as these enormous crowds welcome home the first team on day 1 of the Vuelta. Caja Rural Just over 20 minutes in. This is where they enter the bull ring after this cobbled section. Seats almost 20,000, the third largest bull ring in the world after one in Madrid and in Mexico. And Caja Rural, 2022, first team to cross the finish today in the team time trial. All right, so Radio Shack Nissan is on the left. On the right, you're looking at the pink and blue of the Lampre team. And they are led by Damiano Cunego in his second Grand Tour of the year. Set out the Tour de France after riding the Giro, his home Grand Tour, to kick off his Grand Tour campaign.
Cunego's come into this race saying that he's not riding for the general classification, that he's here for stage hunting, and that he really wants to try and win the World Championships, which will bring you a little bit after the finish of the Vuelta on Universal Sports.
And now back to the struggles of this Garmin Sharp team. Well, for a discipline that we noted earlier requires so much precision and harmony amongst its riders, to have that kind of a crash and then to get everybody back in sync like this, very difficult, not just physically on the road, but also psychologically to get everybody back on the same page.
Yeah, indeed. And look, they only have 5 guys left. Thomas Peterson had just been spit out the back. Then they had the crash that took out a couple more. And so now they're down to the minimum of 5. That means less rest for everybody. And it means if they have any other issues, they all have to wait. We already saw Lemavelle putting his hand up just a moment ago, asking for the team car to come up to him. He dropped off the back. That cost him some time. So they had set the best time at the intermediate check. It's probably not going to hold at this point.
All right, now they have 1K to go to the finish. This is where the road starts to go back uphill and it gets a little more technical, which makes the crash even that much more puzzling because it happened on a part of the course that was kind of wide open, not the most difficult section.
It may have been coming out of a corner. We didn't really get a good shot at it. Coldo Fernandez on the back there for the Radio Shack squad. He's their sprinter. Now we're on the back for Garmin Sharp. Now we're back to Radio Shack.
All right, so this is at the intermediate checkpoint, 8K in. BMC has the best time by 6 seconds over Garmin Sharp, 7 seconds over Orica Green Edge, and we just saw Orica's finish in the bull ring a short time ago.
Yeah, that'd be the intermediate time check, and you never know what's going to happen between that intermediate time split and the finish line. Everything can go very well early on in the race, and it can go very bad late in the race, or the reverse of that sometimes happen. A team will start a little slow, and it will just get better and better as it goes on.
That's the key, really, isn't it? But to get everybody on that same page, though, whether you're starting slow and building up, you're going full gas right out of the gate, but to get everybody doing that at the same level is the trick.
Yeah, for sure. And notice with our 5 Garmin Sharp guys riding right in the middle of the road on that smoothest little part of the road that's not cobblestones. And they're very thankful that that's there on this climb to the finish.
All right, even though they have lost 4 on the road, their GC leader, Andrew Talansky, is in this group of 5. Outside the best time, and they're going to drop a significant chunk here as they come into the bull ring. So this is certainly not the way you want to start out a 3-week, 21-day stage race, almost a minute back. And keep in mind, some of the top team time trial squads haven't even started.
That's a real disaster for that squad because they obviously started out well with the best time at the intermediate time check, and then they had a crash and things just went sour from there.
This is Radio Shack Nissan, and we were talking about the fact that this is the type of a distance in the course where a lot of the top names wouldn't be separated by much on the general classification, but when you have a crash, things can change. And to lose that kind of a time on a stage as fairly as innocuous as this one with so many big mountains to come over the next 3 weeks, that's a difficult hole to dig.
Yeah, it is. It's a real drag for Talansky because he's a guy who came into this race with high hopes and then starting down already. It's not good for the morale. But, you know, as a professional cyclist, you have to be resilient both physically and mentally, and you have to put bad things behind you and keep going and looking for the good.
Lampre on the right, Radio Shack Nissan on the left.
Typically not a good TTT team, but they lost a lot of time there.
Now Rabobank, the team of Robert Haysink, who calls this year's Vuelta the hardest looking course he's ever seen for a Grand Tour.
And that's a scary thought. When you think about the Grand Tours that he has done, there are a lot of big mountains in the Grand Tours typically, and often the ante gets upped year after year. And he thinks this is the hardest one he'll ever have encountered.
Now Haysink has 2 top 10 finishes in the Vuelta over the course of his career. The 26-year-old, though, coming off a disappointing Tour de France, says he had to abandon. So looking for a bounce back in the season's final Grand Tour. Haysink has always been one of those guys who has the climbing ability and the skills to be top 5, maybe even a podium contender at the Grand Tours, but he always crashes out, always fragile in some way, it seems like. Never can put it all together and sustain it over 3 weeks. Crashes, illnesses have always marked his career.
It's a really tough thing for a rider to do. The guys that win these Grand Tours, I don't think that very many people can comprehend how much goes into that to actually put them in a position where they can do it. All the things that have to go right over the course of 3 weeks of racing, and before those 3 weeks of racing, to get them into that place where they're fit enough to actually shine.
He's also got a teammate in Bauke Mollema here who was 4th in the Vuelta last year, just missing out on the podium. So he, along with Haysink, could be a nice 1-2 punch as the race goes on.
Oh, for sure. And Mollema winning the points jersey last year. And that's the first time a rider from the Netherlands has won any special jersey in a Grand Tour in almost 20 years. So Mollema comes in looking for a potential stage place, podium place, as well as Haysink.
So Radio Shack Nissan on the right. They're at the 1K to go banner. Radio Shack Nissan has put in some pretty good team time trial performances this year. They were 2nd in Tirreno Adriatico, 3rd in the recent Tour of Utah, but again, all of that has to be put into the context of it's not always the same riders in the TTT at all of these races. But they still follow the same template, same strategy and blueprint. And now Radio Shack with the minimum of 5 here in this final K as they hit the hill.
Those are the intermediate time splits there for all these teams. Radio Shack came through 6th best at 10 seconds back, but you can see how close they are at the intermediate split, but how much further those gaps have opened up at the finish. That's largely due to this climb at the end, plus these cobbles on this climb. That's where it's really started to stretch people out.
Well, this team time trial starts in the modern area of Pamplona and finishes in the historic Old Town. Over the cobbles now and into the bull ring.
Once again, only 5 men on this squad. Montfort, 6th overall in the Vuelta last year. He's probably their #1 man again this year, but you've talked about Machado as a good backup.
Now, some teams have plan A, plan B. Sometimes those almost run parallel in the fact that they could have co-leaders to an extent. So this is the finish for a team that's actually losing a lot of time now in this final kilometer. Radio Shack Nissan.
You can see Daniele Benatti 4th from the front, so they've kept him with them. And that's a good thing for him, because if they don't lose too much time and he gets time bonuses with stage wins, he could actually potentially move into the overall lead at some point. But 45 seconds, that's a long way back, especially with the first uphill finish just a few days away.
Yeah, it's top 5 for now, and this is the start for Omega Pharma Quickstep. So they are the 12th team to start, and we are officially over the halfway point here in the team time trial at 11th. And Rabobank, always a very interesting squad with GC ambitions. Robert Haysink there on the left-hand side, number 161, coming off a pretty good spell in the U.S. this past spring.
Well, certainly the only 2 wins he's had in this year, out Mount Baldy in the Amgen Tour of California and the overall there.
And they have the lead now at the intermediate checkpoint by 2 seconds, so Rabobank has gone through with the new best time.
I have to say, I wonder if that's a little bit overly ambitious. As you can see, some of the men just sort of trickling off the front. They seem to be really gunning for it right here early. And now the man who was sitting 2nd on the road, that was Dennis Van Winden, actually pulling out because he couldn't close the gap down to Lars Boom on the front. I think Boom is maybe being a little hyper-aggressive here. You got to keep the team cohesive. You can't blow it up.
It's another interesting dynamic to the team time trial is that guys are on different levels of form. And especially this late in the season, some guys have been rested, other guys have been racing, so not everybody's on the same page in terms of their form and fitness, and it makes it that much more difficult to handle something that requires so much precise execution.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that these teams have all been doing the last day or two is they've been riding this course on their team time trial bikes and trying to get a feel for it. But it's always different when the road's closed and you have the adrenaline and the pressure on race day.
So Rabobank, by just a couple of seconds at the 8K intermediate, they have the new best time. Now it's a matter of sustaining it over the second part of the course that includes that climb inside the final kilometer where we've seen most teams lose some riders. And now this is the AG2R squad that is coming up to the finish. John Gaudret, the Frenchman, among the notables on this team, and really our first look at them as they make their way into the bull ring and finishing with, once again, just a minimum of 23 seconds off the pace.
Stegmans, as he just got his ticket punched.
Astana down the start ramp and away they go. So Astana, the 14th team to start here, but BMC still in the lead at the Vuelta.
Their habit in these prologue or these team time trial starts of the Vuelta.
As one team finishes, another team begins. The Basque-based Euskaltel team in the orange and black, team led by Igor Anton. 2 years ago, wearing the leader's jersey, in control of this race, crashed out on a fairly benign flat section. Lost the overall lead, left the race, and really hasn't been the same since. 29-year-old has failed to crack the top 15 of a 3-week Grand Tour since that crash 2 years ago. So he is hoping for a big bounce back in 2012 as we pick up Omega Pharma Quick-Step.
This team's been blowing guys out the back door all day long, so they're down now only to 6 riders. 3 have been popped off the back on the right. Euskaltel, and one of the things about Igor Anton, the leader of this team, was last year at the Giro d'Italia, it looked like he might have the form coming back. He won that really big stage in the Giro up on top of the Zoncolan, but then when he got to the Vuelta, he just never really had it.
And he was building his whole season around the Vuelta, and he's one of the few riders who has the luxury of just making this his season focus, which he's done again here this year. He's waited until the Vuelta. His whole year's been built around this, but he admits it's a lot of pressure, and that's one of the things that got to him and caused the crash a couple of years ago. He just wasn't ready for the weight of the moment. So now here he is with a course that really suits him. Not a lot of time trialing, a lot of big hills, but can he sustain it over 3 weeks? We know he can win some big individual mountain stages, but can he carry his form and handle that pressure over all 21 days?
Well, speaking of carrying the form and handling the pressure, Rabobank here has set out a very good early time. They were the best at the intermediate time check. Now that's been bested by Omega Pharma Quick-Step. But these guys still, they really came to this team time trial guns a-blazing as we saw the team a little ragged in the early part.
Threatening BMC's lead. These are the narrow, tight, old town streets of Pamplona. Cobblestones leading into the bull ring. Now they're going to make a push to be the new best team here, still with 6 riders, so they've only lost 3.
They're almost coming apart right now. It looks like it's Boom on the front, or Bohm, excuse me, who's just drilling it, and you see the guys at the back floundering, trying to hold on. The 6th man looks like he's coming off, but the other 5 have managed to hang on the wheel.
Most teams finishing with just 5, the minimum required, as they come down towards the finish. Going to be close here as they enter the bull ring. BMC 19:01, the top time, and now Rabobank 1 second faster, 19 even to take the lead.
Wow, that's a bummer for the American BMC squad as they put in the best ride early and very much better than most of the teams that have finished so far.
The 6th man came up off the tail end of the train right there at the end. This is as they came into the tunnel leading into the bull ring. And they had...
Still leads the time unofficially as the best team.
So Euskaltel has lost 2 riders. They're down to 7. And this is Cofidis. The first of the final 5 teams. 22 starting today, all in 4-minute intervals. Argos Shimano, Sky, Saxo Bank, and Movistar, the only other teams left to go.
Cofidis, a team who, whenever they get in a team time trial, tends to not have a very enjoyable time of it. They will be trying primarily to get David Moncoutier into the mountains classification winner's jersey once again.
Well, Euskaltel really having trouble keeping everybody together here. They're going to be down to 5 pretty quickly the way things are going.
It's not a real surprise, honestly. I mean, you think, well, how hard can it be? You follow your teammates. Well, the real hard part of the team time trial is you're on the front, you pull till you're totally in the red, you swing off, as we see one rider right now coming back on the left, and if they go into a corner or they accelerate just a little bit as you're trying to get on, sometimes you just can't get on the back, and that's the hardest point, is getting on the back right there. And really, Osterloza did a fantastic job of just sliding into the back there, but you'll notice a lot of time guys getting out of the saddle struggling to catch that wheel.
We got Lotto on the right, Euskaltel on the left. Lotto featuring Zdeněk Štýbar, the world cyclocross champion, a guy who's dominated that discipline of cycling, now making his Grand Tour debut at this year's Vuelta.
Olivier Kaizen at the back here, 135. Struggling a little bit right now on a little rise. He will not be one of the 5 that they count at the finish line up that final climb.
So Omega Pharma Quickstep still has the best time at the split. Rabobank, according to the official time now, leading in the clubhouse, or in this case the bull ring. But the times between our top 3 teams are almost insignificant. They're so close at this particular point. And we still have the top team time trial squads getting set to go here shortly. Expect Sky to put in a pretty good ride. Saxo Bank will also be strong for Sky, featuring Chris Froome, Saxo Bank, Alberto Contador, and then Movistar, the team of defending champion JJ Cobo and Alejandro Valverde, a former Vuelta winner himself.
Well, certainly an important matchup at the end as we're looking at Astana now coming into these cobbles. Very important matchup is Sky and Saxo Bank, because both of those guys, the leader of each of those teams, Froome and Contador, are the #1 and #2 favorites for the race. So that's important that they, for each of their teams, that they get a very good ride.
Well, for Astana, they have dropped their 5th man off the back. He's clawing his way, and they realize now that they have to sit up for him here.
It's Bazayev on the front, and maybe being a little bit too energetic there.
No matter how good you're feeling, doesn't do you any good if you don't finish with your teammates and bring at least 5 to the line. So Astana started out strong, and they will finish in 4th at 22 seconds back as Rabobank, the team of Robert Hayes-Sink, Bok Mollema, in the leaders' chairs in the bull ring. And this team set its plan early this season. As far as the Grand Tours were concerned, they said they just wanted to win at least a stage of all 3 of the Grand Tours. Lars Bach won a stage at the Giro. Andre Greipel won 3 stages at the Tour de France. Now, just hoping to round it out with the stage win. The Euskaltel team coming towards the finish. Wildly popular in their home region. Rabobank, the team leading at 19:01. Euskaltel has had trouble keeping everybody together, but they've got enough guys here.
And they're still having some trouble right now as they're going up this climb. Guys starting to come apart just a little bit. It looks like Antone on the front there, very contorted face in that team time trial helmet, but look at him, he is just punishing his teammates, and he's dropped the 5th man.
So they'll finish with 5, and in 4th place at 17 seconds back, so not too bad.
That's actually a very good ride for that Spanish team that's not known for its team time trial strength. And it was the 6th man that he ended up dropping there at the end, so they kept 5 together, the prerequisite they need. That's a very good sign for him and his team.
And now we're down to the final 3 teams, beginning with Sky, then Saxo Bank, before Movistar will be the final squad down the start ramp in Pamplona. And so begins the intriguing journey of Chris Froome, who has finished 2nd in his last 2 Grand Tours when he has been held back, riding for a different rider. But now for the first time at this year's Vuelta, he gets a chance to ride for himself as the team leader on GC.
It's a huge opportunity for the man born and raised in Kenya, but has been a British citizen the last few years. His team trainer, Bobby Julich, works with him very closely, was motor pacing him earlier this week. Told me that he thinks Froome is very good, coming in just a little bit off his best. He thinks he will get better as it goes on, and he thinks he can contend.
2nd at the Tour de France, a race that most people believe he could have won had he not been working for his teammate Bradley Wiggins. Then went to London, won the bronze medal in the time trial. So he's had good form for a long time. Now the question, can he hold it? But we were asking that question of Brad Wiggins all season long, and he never let go of it.
It's true, and you know, I would like to say that even though a lot of people think that Chris Froome could have won the Tour de France, I don't think he could have won. I think that he would have gained some time over Wiggins on the climbs, but I think he would have lost enough time in the time trials, which were very long, that I don't really think he would have won that race, but we'll obviously never know.
Well, certainly debatable.
Yeah, it sure is.
In the form he had, you know, if you're given that sort of freedom to ride, you just don't know what might happen.
It's true. And one of the things that Froome is going to have to contend with here is being a team leader. He's never been the team leader at a Grand Tour. Chris Froome at last year's Vuelta didn't have a contract for this year. It was his last part of his contract with Sky. He had never been as good as he's been for the last year. Now look at him. He got 2nd in the Vuelta last year, got a 3-year extension with Sky, and there he is, 181. Then he went on to get 2nd at the Tour, 3rd at the Olympics.
This is Lotto Belisol coming up towards the finish. Just about a minute off Rabobank's time. And still a ways to go before they enter the bull ring here.
You notice they went blowing by Enrico Gasparotto, the Astana man, who was way off the back. I hope he doesn't miss the time cut today.
Lotto Belisol, a team that's not going to be a big player in the time trials, be it the team or the individual that comes up midway through this year's Vuelta. Once again, a team looking for stages and also perhaps GC aspirations for Jürgen Vandenbroek.
Very good ride for these guys, considering the lack of pressure they put on themselves coming into the race. Vandenbroek on the front as he drills it up this final climb, and he's blowing his team apart. He'll have to make sure he has 5 guys with him. He has a gap, then 3, then another gap, then 1. So he needs to just ease up a little bit there at the end. 4th best.
So not bad. Actually pretty impressive for this Lotto team. Right now just saying a couple of seconds off, so Rabobank holds the lead.
You saw Lawrence ten Dam there for Rabobank shaking his hand a little bit. Very concerned that they were going to get bumped out of the hot seat there by Lotto Belisol.
So we're going to see just how good some of these times are as these next teams really get rolling. We saw Sky and Chris Froome start a few moments ago. Saxo Bank will be next with Alberto Contador, starting 4 minutes behind Froome. And Alberto Contador and his return to Grand Tour cycling at this year's Vuelta a Espana. A race he won the last time he lined up here in 2008. What do you think is going through Contador's head right about now?
Everything that's going through my head and a whole lot more. Does he have what it takes? Has he put in the right training? No real racing for 6 months except for a small stage race that ended 6 days ago. And he's got this team that's unified behind him. The team time trial is not their strong suit. They want to minimize their loss today. Sky could be a little better than them today. It's a very good course overall for Contador. He's very explosive. There's so many uphill finishes, 10 of them in total.
And he has said that he's not going to be in his best condition in the first week. He's going to ride into it and expects to be at his best in the second and third week. So if you hear that and you're his competition, you think, well, we should attack him early on. So it's going to be very interesting over the course of this first week of racing how many guys do go right at Contador, who attack him on some of the uphill finishes we have in the first week.
And on the right side, there's the Katusha team, and they had a very good intermediate split. That's the team of Joaquim Rodriguez. He has actually matured a lot the last few years. He used to attack like a wild man on every uphill finish, even at the beginning of a Grand Tour. He's starting to hold back now a little bit. Let's not forget this Katusha squad. Rodriguez was second to Hejdahl overall at the Giro d'Italia this year. They were also second to Garmin in the team time trial. So this team has come a long way. Valerio Piva, their director, has worked with this team extensively on the individual time trial and the team time trial, and it has paid huge dividends.
That was maybe the most surprising aspect of the Giro, the fact that Katusha was second in the team time trial, and that's what really kept Rodriguez in that race all the way down to the final day.
Sure, so they were only 4 seconds back at the intermediate time split. We'll see how they are to the finish. They still have more guys than they need. It looks like 6 guys left for them. And so they can still drop 1 guy on this climb to the finish.
They were third in the team time trial recently at the Eneco Tour. This is inside the final kilometer. The cobbled streets taking them to the bull ring. 6 riders.
And it's Rodriguez on the front. So he's pulling them all the way up this final climb as he continues on just to drill it there with, looks like Denis Menchov, the Russian national time trial champion, sitting on his wheel. Menchov is a former winner of multiple Grand Tours. He has come purely in the service of Rodriguez to try and get Rodriguez onto the top step of the podium in Madrid.
Denis Menchov, a 2-time winner of the Vuelta, yet he is here to work for somebody else. Very interesting dynamic for this Katusha team, as it is everybody behind Rodriguez this year.
Yeah, and on top of that, Menchov is Russian, and this team is Russian. But Rodriguez is Spanish. This race is in Spain. Rodriguez leads them across, 5th best, 4 seconds back. That's a very solid ride for that team.
So Rabobank holds the lead, but something that we're really seeing is the fact that so many teams are right there, near the top. I mean, the separation is just a matter of seconds between the top squads.
And we should see a very similar ride by Sky. I'm not as high on the chances of Contador's Saxo Bank Tinkoff Bank team. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I think they're going to lose a little bit more time.
Now, the final of the 22 teams to start, Movistar. And our defending champion, J.J. Cobo, leading this team along with Alejandro Valverde, another Vuelta winner. That is Valverde there, coming off the Tour de France and the London Olympic Games. So he's had a lot of racing lately.
He certainly has. He says that he's here purely to help Cobo repeat. It's a big ask. Valverde leads him off the line on the left side there.
So our final team now out on course. Rabobank leading, but Chris Froome, Alberto Contador, J.J. Cobo, all out on course now, riding the team time trial on stage 1. Looking down on the team of Movistar. J.J. Cobo, defending Vuelta champion from last year, wearing number 1 at this year's race, but because of an infected wisdom tooth, he took 10 days off the bike recently, missed some very important training. Not at his best, by his own admission, coming into this Vuelta defense, but they do have a pretty good plan B in Alejandro Valverde. If he hasn't tired himself out too much from his recent exploits at the Olympics and at the Tour de France. So an interesting makeup for this Movistar team. Not the ideal way you'd like to begin the Vuelta, with Cobo not at his best and Valverde maybe still with some form that's carrying over, but it's not like he's been preparing specifically for this race.
And for sure, that's true. And not only that, but Valverde really wasn't looking all that good at the Tour. He got a stage win, but he was not in general classification form.
All right, so this is at the intermediate split, 8K in. Sky has the best time.
Movistar in second at 2 seconds, and 2 seconds up in front of Saxo Bank. That's actually a very good intermediate split for Team Movistar.
And Sky is inside the final kilometer. That's the old fortress walls of Pamplona. Chris Froome really cracking the whip here. Sky with a very loaded team in support of Froome for the general classification. They're not worried about the sprints, not worried about a rider like Mark Cavendish. This is all for one goal here. They have 6 riders. And the time of Rabobank at 19:01 is the target. And they have a good shot at taking the lead.
Juan Antonio Flecha on the front. And once again, right there in the middle in the only semi-smooth part of these cobblestones as they come into the finish.
Now, who will lead them across? That person could potentially be the first wearer of the red jersey as overall race leader. But they have to get past Rabobank first, and inside that time of 19:01.
Richie Porte just peeling off the front there as well. So it looks like they're going to put in a very good time.
Coming to the line here. 5 guys have to hit the finish line to get the official time, and it's just 2 seconds back, but that's 4th. Rabobank hangs on.
Look at Mollema there, sporting the bike tan there with the jersey off in the hot seat. Richie Porte here on the front. You can see the face of the Tasmanian there as he swings off. Froome now, 3rd wheel from the front as they come to the finish with 1 guy more than they need.
So what we're seeing is really the battle for the stage win, but as far as the general classification, as we highlighted earlier, it's just going to be a few seconds at most between the top riders, and with such a hilly profile for this year's Vuelta, it's going to be rather insignificant in the long run. Rabobank over Omega Pharma Quickstep and BMC. Sky, Lotto, Katusha, you can go 6 deep and it's still just a 5-second separation. And Rabobank.
And their soigneurs now bringing them food and so on. You saw the vest they were wearing earlier. Those are cold vests to keep them cool. 2:01, second from the back here, Alberto Contador, the big favorite to win this thing overall.
We've seen 5 riders here, so they've dropped 4. Sometimes it's a rider or 2 just out of the camera shot, but it looks, by what we're seeing here, is they're down to the minimum already.
I agree. I don't think there's anyone else out of the camera shot. It's a little bit early to be down to 4, 5 guys because that means they have to keep them all together on that final kilometer uphill to the finish. Be a lot better off if they had some more guys to use up right now that could then just sit up at the end.
And you can see how many of the riders, including Contador here, number 201, are looking around, making sure they're all together. One rider doesn't take off too far down the road because there's no margin for error at this point.
Well, when you're going over 30 miles an hour average, you think about that. You start out at a standstill. You also have that climb, the final kilometer. It means they're going very fast, well over 35 in a lot of parts of the course. So it is really tough to stick together. That's 1K to go, 0.6 of a mile.
Again, the top 6 separated by just 5 seconds with Rabobank, the team that's leading, Saxo Bank, and then Movistar, the final 2 teams to hit the finish line today in Pamplona.
And one man struggling at the back right now. We saw Paulino looking back. That's Bruno Pires, the Portuguese rider. He's made it back up to the wheel.
Well, the advantage other teams had, they, for the most part, brought at least 6 guys up that hill. So that gives you some margin to work with. But when you start that final climb with only 5, you got to keep it together. Now they'll come to the top of the hill on the cobbles.
Contador on the front, keeping an eye on his teammates. But I have something to tell you, Alberto. You're putting them through a world of hurt right now. The gap is opening up. And climbing up these cobblestones, it's so hard to get the power transfer.
All right, so 5 here, single file. Rabobank, the team that's leading. Saxo Bank looking to challenge here. Second to last team on the course. Rabobank has been leading for quite some time. Several teams clustered near the top, separated by just seconds.
Contador still rallying on the front. He's been on the front a long time.
Final push. They need all 5 across the line. They are going to go outside the time of Rabobank, and officially for Saxo Bank, it'll be 6th place. 5 seconds removed from our leading squad we see here. The Rabobank just has to wait for one more team, Movistar.
Contador pulling most of the way up that final climb, that final kilometer. In the bars there for maximum aerodynamic efficiency as he comes in around that final corner into the bull ring. Managed to keep 4 teammates on the wheel, but it was not without a lot of suffering by those guys to hang on to the Spaniard.
Now they had to ride with just 5 for quite a while, longer than they wanted to. But still finishing within 5 seconds of our top team right now. And that'll take us down to the final team on the road in Pamplona, Movistar. Rabobank, Omega, BMC Sky, Lotto, Saxo. Now 7 deep here with Katusha rounding out the top 7, separated by just 5 seconds. And most of the marquee GC riders that we talked about earlier in the show are within that 5-second range of time.
It's amazingly tight at the top. I can't recall ever seeing 3 teams in a team time trial tied on the same second for first.
7 riders left for Movistar here.
They did have a very good first intermediate split. Second best on the day, but I really don't expect them to finish second best on the day. I think they'll be a little bit further down.
Now, if there was one Grand Tour where you looked ahead at the profile for all 3 weeks and realized that the time gaps in the opening stage of a team time trial were pretty insignificant, this would be the one. So to have teams and top riders so close, really not a big story in terms of anybody losing any kind of time that's going to hurt them long term here today. Everybody is still very close together with so many stages in the next 20 days of racing that can provide an opportunity for things to really open up.
You can see the guys on the climb here. They had 5 just a moment ago, now, or 7, now they're down to 6. They do need 5 by the finish.
Well, Movistar has been a very interesting team throughout the course of this season because they kind of come and go. Disappear off the radar at times, then they're back for various stage wins. They'd really like to finish off strong here in what is their home Grand Tour in Spain. And now, one rider off the front here as the others try to hang on. And looks like they still have 6 here to work with.
Well, the man off the front just that little bit is Benyat Chosti. And we've seen this with a lot of teams. On a very demanding finish, you've got to just hold back that little bit and keep your team together. But you want to push them to their absolute maximum because we see there's 3 teams tied for first. If one team went half a second faster, they'd be the outright leader.
All right, so this will do it. Coming up to the end of the team time trial on stage 1 of the Vuelta in Pamplona. On the same streets where the Bulls run every July. The cyclists now headed towards the famous bull ring. Movistar, the final of 22 teams, and they hit the finish in first place.
Best by 10 seconds. Unreal ride for the Spanish team. They would have never been considered a favorite. Look at this Rabobank squad, devastated. They just got smoked, and so did everybody else. Truly phenomenal ride by these guys. I would have never thought they would have contended for first, let alone to blow everybody out of the water by 10 seconds.
After all the strong teams that came through and were just a second or 2 behind the time of Rabobank, and now Movistar with the big exclamation point on stage number 1.
I'll tell you what, that was a huge exclamation point. They have really said something to everybody today. What a statement.
Finished with only 5, but that's all they needed. Finished with 5, win by 10. Movistar takes the opening stage at the Vuelta a Espana. Our second day of racing at the season's final Grand Tour. Just over 181 kilometers from Pamplona to Viana. And the general classification after the first day features a lot of the top names at the top of the leaderboard, separated by just a few seconds at the sign-in for stage 2. No doubt feeling good about getting that first day of racing back in a Grand Tour under his belt yesterday.
Yeah, there's a lot of nerves for a guy like Contador, especially because he's been out of racing for the last 6 months, except for one smaller race which ended just a week ago. And so everybody has those jitters at the beginning, but he must especially. That's big Miguel Indurain next to him. As you can see, all the attention is really on Alberto Contador, even though he's not the leader of the race.
Well, he is still by far the most popular rider in Spain, even though he's been sitting out because of the doping-related suspension. Now coming back to the sport in his home Grand Tour, where he won the last time that he lined up in 2008. So this was as they rolled off the start line in Pamplona. And we will take you out on the road. Live racing, stage 2 coming up when we come back here on Universal. Stage 2 of the Vuelta a Espana in northern Spain, heading west from Pamplona to Viana today. One of the few chances for the sprinters at this year's race.
181 kilometers, about 113 miles as they originally started out south from Pamplona, as then started heading west over to Viana, finishing up with a circuit of about 19 kilometers, and that's 11 miles along the way. They've already been over the only classified climb of the day, a Category 3.
And now we are live with a 3-man breakaway that has a lead of over 3 minutes. That is Mikhail Ignatiev, the Russian for Katusha in the red and white. And he's had a lot of problems already today, a couple of different bike changes, but he's still in the breakaway, joined by the Spaniard Javier Chacon of the Andalucia team and also Javier Aramendia of Caja Rural. And that is number 24, Chacon, in the blue and white ahead of the Russian Ignatiev, and Aramendia sitting at the back in the green and white. They had a lead of over 5 minutes at one point. 77 or so kilometers left to go now, and again the lead is just over 3 minutes on top of this main field. And they've already gone over the only categorized climb of the day, a Cat 3, much earlier in the stage, and there's some rolling terrain the rest of the way, but largely flat for the most part. That's why we believe it should come down to pretty much of a bunch sprint.
Very much a good shot for the sprinters today. Look for the teams that don't have big GC aspirations for the overall classification to really put more of their resources into a field sprint should it come down to that today, which it certainly should.
All right, so the margin now exactly 3 minutes for our 3 leaders. First breakaway of this year's Vuelta a Espana. No surprise to see 2 Spaniards in the group from 2 teams that are smaller Spanish teams, and their goals here at their home Grand Tour is just to get as much exposure as possible. So they're out there in the breakaways for Caja Rural, for Andalucia, and Ignatiev joining him, the Russian for Katusha. Now, the big field still together here, and while there aren't that many opportunities for the sprinters at this year's race, what you will also won't see is the big blue chip sprinters. They're not here, so that also is going to make it difficult to control breakaways and field sprints as well.
I think part of the issue with some of those blue chip sprinters not coming to Spain is the simple fact that there are 10 uphill finishes in the race this year. So it's going to be a brutal race for 3 weeks for any guy who's a sprinter because they really suffer in the mountains. And also there's been just such a massive season for everybody so far, and a lot of guys hoping they can sort of recover a little bit for the World Championships, which are not long after this race finishes.
Now, nobody among this trio in the breakaway inside of a minute back of our leader, Jonathan Castro Viejo of the Movistar team. And Boy, what a surprise it was for Movistar yesterday in that team time trial after so many other teams were just separated by fractions of a second at the finish line, and they come through as the last of 22 teams, and they win by 10 seconds.
Truly amazing to see those guys. I have not seen them on the podium in a team time trial in the last 2 seasons except for once before yesterday, and that was when they won the team time trial at the Vuelta a Burgos last year. So it's not common for them to be winning team time trials.
And they are riding at the front on the right-hand side of the screen in the blue and the green, as they have Castroviejo as the current leader wearing the red jersey, but they also have the defending champion, JJ Cobo, who won the Vuelta last year. They have a former Vuelta winner in Alejandro Valverde on the squad, and Cobo, who's trying to defend from last year, actually lost 4 seconds. He didn't finish with the front group of Movistar riders who won the team time trial, lost a few seconds right at the end, and he still admits he's not at his best, primarily because of an infected wisdom tooth that's caused some complications with his training.
Really interesting to hear him say before the race started that the wisdom tooth actually caused him more pain than a kidney operation he had in the past. So that says something to me. That must have been really bad. Get strung out by one team really taking the bull by the horns, as it were, then other teams start coming around. There's more fighting for position, and there's more of an opportunity for guys to hit the deck.
Well, Movistar has taken control here because they have the responsibility of the race leader, at least for now. With Jonathan Castroviejo, he was the first man for the Movistar team across the line in the team time trial, and as a result, he becomes the first official leader of the race. Big traffic circle that the riders have to navigate here, and interestingly enough, speaking of directions and navigating obstacles on the course, yesterday it was Tony Martin of Omega Pharma Quickstep who said that during the team time trial, a police escort motorcycle led them the wrong way around a traffic circle, and along with Zdeněk Štibar, who was on Martin's wheel, they went the wrong way and cost the team time at the finish. So they had to get back on course, and if you remember, Omega Pharma Quickstep was right there, near the best time. So that obviously cost them more than just a few seconds. So if they had not been let off course by the police motorcycle, according to Tony Martin, they would have won the TTT.
Yeah, well, that's very often happens in bike racing, and there's not a lot you can do about it, unfortunately. People make mistakes, and there's no way to add the time of those mistakes back into a team. Whether it's a fan crashing a rider, a police escort, or any type of escort taking riders off course, it happens regularly.
So the rider for Caja Rural, Javier Aramendia, 25-year-old Spaniard, in the green and white, along with his fellow Spaniard Javier Chacon of Andalusia and the Russian Mikhail Ignatiev. Just hitting a steady tempo. Classic flat stage kind of breakaway at a Grand Tour. 3 guys who you don't expect much from long-term in the general classification.
Verde there, he's one of the guys who will look for stages, but he doesn't seem to have the general classification ambitions. So what do? You look for those breakaways. Once you get into the race, if you can't outclimb Contador, you have to look for another way to get time.
Alejandro Valverde won the Vuelta back in 2009. Teammate JJ Cobo won it last year. And their teammate Jonathan Castroviejo leading after day 1 here this year for Movistar. And because Contador admitted that he probably won't be at his best in his first week and expects to be better in the second and third weeks, doesn't it make sense to attack him early in the first few mountain stages to try and get time? Because if he hangs with you or even goes by you in week 1 and then he's only getting better, it doesn't give you much of a shot.
It is very tough. You know, one of the problems with going on the attack, say the next 2 days, is if you end up in the leader's jersey, then you put your team in an uncompromising position where they have to defend, and it tires them out. So honestly, what the guys end up doing is they take chances wherever they see them. If they see any opportunity tomorrow, they'll go for it. The same thing with the next day and so on. And Contador's the same way. There are a lot of times we've seen him in the Grand Tours where he attacks, and at the end of the race, people ask him if it was premeditated. He said no. You know, he'll often say, I saw an opportunity, I took an opportunity, and every racer needs to play that game.
All right, so our three breakaway riders coming through the town now, known for the GP Miguel Indurain race every spring, still holding on to a healthy lead here on stage 2. Today's stage starting in Pamplona, an historic town with an historic bull ring, like the many we see in Spain every year at the Vuelta. The one in Pamplona hosted the finish of yesterday's team time trial in front of just under 20,000 spectators, third largest bull ring in the world after ones in Madrid and Mexico. And Pamplona has played a rich part of the history of this Spanish Grand Tour, now hosting the Vuelta on over 20 occasions. But on the other end of that spectrum, we have today's Finnish town of Viana hosting the Vuelta for the very first time at the end of today's stage 2.
Man on the back, Chacon, who will be in the King of the Mountains lead after today. He had a win earlier this year, stage 5 of the Tour of Azerbaijan, and a couple of years ago he won stage 10 of the Tour of Venezuela. The other man in the break, Aramendia, has not had any wins yet in his professional career.
Under 60 kilometers now left to go. Movistar still at the front, and for all the sprinters teams, this is just fun. You're going to let them do the work. None of the sprinters teams has to take control, worry about the breakaway, and they can save their legs for later. And given what we've already talked about, the fact that none of the sprinters teams are that strong in leading out a sprint, this is just what they need.
The longer you can save your legs and do the damage late, the better. The lead out is always about that. It's about having that patience and that ability to figure out exactly when you need to mass your team at the front just before the other teams are about to do it. Because once it happens by another team, sometimes it's hard to get up there and get your team on the front. You can see on the right there, 3:14. That's the old school way of telling the riders in the peloton what the gap is, just in case their radios in their ears are not working. 3 minutes, 14 seconds is the physical time gap that motorcycle takes, writes down, and then shows to the field, and then goes back up and shows the breakaway.
Now Team Sky in the blue, white, and black, right behind Movistar. Now for Sky, they have one of the top sprinters here at this year's Vuelta in Ben Swift, but they also have a top GC hopeful in Chris Froome. And as we've also talked about, the big question for Froome is, can he hold that form he's had basically all year? And in particular, the last month or so, coming off second at the Tour de France and a bronze medal in the time trial at the Olympic Games. And can he take that forward now into his first time leadership role at a Grand Tour? Really battle Contador and challenge for the red jersey.
Yeah, and I spoke once again with Bobby Julich, who is Froome's trainer on Team Sky, and asked him how he was yesterday and how he was before the start today. And he says he went really well yesterday. He felt good. But Julich wanted to point out that Sergio Henao is really going to turn some heads at this year's Vuelta, he thinks. He referred to him as a bull. So we'll see if he can be strong and smart and when he gets to the mountains.
And he's a good climber, no doubt, Sergio Henao, but this has got to be Chris Froome's team.
It's got to be his team. I guess maybe what Bobby was telling me was, hey, look, you never know if Froome is going to be good for the whole of 3 weeks after what he did at the Tour de France and then went on to the Olympics, getting the bronze medal there after taking second to his team leader at the Tour. If he starts to come down, which is always a question mark, will there be somebody else on the team?
Now one of the Saxo Bank riders dropping off, Sergio Paulinho, Portuguese rider, going back to the team car. Saxo Bank at the front just a moment ago with Alberto Contador, who no doubt had to feel good about getting that first Grand Tour stage back under his belt yesterday, despite all the training he's been doing, all of the work away from the sport. You can never replicate real race conditions in training.
Looks like Chacon is getting shed from that breakaway group. He's the man who took the King of the Mountain sprint by default, and look at this. The field right on their back wheels. Chacon was not first over the King of the Mountain sprint, but he was hooked by Aramendia, who then had to surrender those points according to the judges.
All right, so one man dropping from the break, now just Aramendia and Ignatiev, but they are also under a minute back to the field. That is just about to reel them back in here in the closing moments of stage 2.
Dia is a guy who is really kind of a breakaway specialist, just like the other men he's been away with all day. Really no wins for him in his career, but he was second overall in the King of the Mountains competition last year at Tirreno Adriatico by virtue of breakaways. You can see him sort of pushing his hand down toward the ground. That's the universal sign for the guys behind you. Hey, slow down a little bit. We got a pretty nasty looking corner up ahead.
And now that there's just two, more work to share, as the gap is just 45 seconds. So this field a little more interested now in what is happening up the road than they were earlier.
Things now, this is where it starts to get a little bit more nervy and a little bit more dangerous in the peloton. Notice how it's not really stretched out much at the front. It's literally gutter to gutter in the road, which means there's very little room at the front if somebody makes a mistake, and there's also very little room for anybody to move up at the front, so they try and squeeze through very small holes.
At the back there in the turquoise colors, that is Paulo Tiralongo for the Espana team. Mentioned he was caught up in that crash yesterday, bruised his hip, and he's at the back of the field right now. Our leaders, under 25K left, so they're just about 6 kilometers away from seeing the finish line for the first time. That'll be the start of the circuit around the finishing town of Viana. And from there, it'll be 19K back to the end of the stage. Ignatiev leading Aramendia. Well, admittedly, it has been a less than epic stage, but for the few sprinters we have at this race, that's just the way they needed it to go, because they didn't have to use their teams to control a very tough breakaway today. We've seen the team of Movistar. They have the overall race leader in Jonathan Castroviejo. So they've been doing most of the work at the front of the field. So the few sprinters we do have in the race, because they don't have as strong as teams to lead them out, they've been sitting back, conserving their energy. So because they're going to be freelancing in the sprints, things have gone just the way they had hoped they would. And some good crowds turning out on this first Sunday of the Vuelta. And now check this out. This is the slight uphill that leads into the finish. It's the start of the circuit here, but this is what they'll be facing in perhaps a bunch sprint at the end of the stage. That is the intermediate sprint point that they're hitting right there. And then the finish line is actually coming up here shortly.
Yeah, they actually, the way they come into the finish this first time through is slightly different than it will be in the race, because they come in inside the final kilometer and they make a very hard left-hand turn.
Here's the left right here. And
so that this will be a right-hander when they're actually coming in at the finish, and they'll come in from a slightly different angle. Now here's that just slight 1% uphill, and notice how it really doesn't look like it's going to slow them down much.
Yeah, the banner back there was just the intermediate sprint again, just so there's no confusion. Now this is coming into what will be the finish of the stage, 19 kilometers from now. So as you can see, pretty wide. Nothing really tricky about this.
It looks like Ignatiev wants that intermediate sprint pretty dearly, so he has gone for it.
So he's not going to be challenged here.
No, Aramendia just sitting back and trying now to claw his way back up there. Clock ticking, 7 seconds. We'll see what the actual time is back to the peloton. It's not very far.
And Jonathan Castroviejo for Movistar just off the front of the field here as they ride in. And it looks like Alberto Contador on the far right-hand side of the screen right alongside Castroviejo. So he's sitting up there amongst the first few riders as they start the circuit around the finishing town of Viana.
Well, there are time bonuses for the top 3 at that intermediate sprint, and that may be why we saw Contador up there, maybe looking if he could just snake one away, but he didn't get it.
All right, so it's 39 seconds to our 2 leaders. Here they are, Ignatiev along with Aramendia. But their timeout, that Contador picked up the final 2-second time bonus, so that would pull him even on time with Chris Froome right now, and it is official. They are tied at this point, heading towards the final 13.5K of stage number 2.
Well, that will explain why we saw Contador and Froome slightly off the front of the field moments ago as they were getting reabsorbed after that sprint.
All right, so Ignatiev is in the red and white, and for Caja Rural in the green and white, Javier Aramendia, but they realize that it's just about over here.
You don't think they're going to stay away at this point, Steve?
You know, I'm pretty conservative by nature, Gogo. So I'm going to say that it's just about time up. And what's going to get intriguing now is, will a team come forward other than Sky, who's now working their way to the front for Ben Swift? But outside of them, any of these other sprinters that we've talked about, will their teams try and take some type of a leadership role? Of course, Ben Swift is the sprinter for Sky, but then for Ulrika Greenedge, Alan Davis, for Argo Shimano, John Degenkolb. We talked about Elia Viviani for Liquigas, JJ Rojas for Movistar, and Daniela Bonatti of Radio Shack. Will any of their teams bring multiple riders to the front to ride for their sprinting ambitions?
Well, the two men at the front are just about absorbed, and I would have to answer your question with a resounding yes. We will see at least one team come to the front with sprinter ambitions. And really what they're doing right now is they're just waiting as long as possible to save their resources. Aramendia reaching over there to congratulate Ignatiev. Hey, job well done. Now that we've been off the front all day for 100 miles, what a drag.
Peloton Agrupado. Everybody is together in the group with a dozen K left to go. So the full field flowing along here, headed towards a big bunch sprint. One of the few opportunities for a full field sprint at this year's Vuelta, just about a half dozen flat stages altogether. So you've got Team Sky in the dark colors at the front riding for Ben Swift. On the right-hand side in the red and white, that is Katusha. They are more or less riding for GC and Joaquim Rodriguez. And of course, you always see the GC teams at the front just to stay out of trouble.
Man at the front for Team Sky on the left side at the top of the screen, the American Danny Pate, as he came over from the High Road squad, which closed up shop after last season.
Now the pace has certainly picked up, stretched out a little bit more in the field as we come up on the final 11K of stage number 2. The break is caught. The field is together here at the Vuelta. Such a timing issue. If the lead out gets disrupted, and without the prototypical lead out, who is going to time it just right as they come into the sprint in Viana?
Well, now not giving up yet. Omega Pharma Quick-Step on the front. Honestly, they don't have a top-tier sprinter in the bike race.
All right, so now we're left with Radio Shack Nissan in the front, riding for Daniela Bonatti. Behind them, Ulrika Greenedge, riding for Alan Davis. That red kite is 1 kilometer left to go to the finish. Liquigas has been moving up in the green and white. They're riding, of course, for Elia Viviani. And in the white with the green trim, Argo Shimano, riding for John Degenkolb. Haven't seen much of Team Sky, riding for Ben Swift. They were up front earlier, but they've dropped back now.
And maybe they're not going to commit the resources to these field sprints. It's really spreads your team thin when you do that. But it's still Ulrika Greenedge all over the front. Right behind them, several riders from Argo Shimano.
All right, but they're spreading out here in the final kilometer. Ulrika Greenedge with the blue and white riding at the front. Argo Shimano in the white with green trim just behind them. Now here comes Radio Shack Nissan up the middle with the dark shoulders. As the sprinters try and get things organized, working their way to the front. Ben Swift is a few riders back for Team Sky. That's half a kilometer left to go.
Pretty much a straight road from here all the way to the finish, about a 1% uphill.
John Degenkolb in the white starts to launch the sprint up the middle. Here comes Ben Swift, also in the dark colors for Team Sky. Philippe Gilbert giving it a go for BMC as well. That is Swift near the front. Now here comes Alan Davis there on the left-hand side. At the line, it's going to be Swift, Davis, Degenkolb. Who's going to get it? John Degenkolb, it looks like, for Argo Shimano, just pulls it out.
Very close there at the end, but it does look like Degenkolb. Then it looks like Alan Davis and Ben Swift unofficially in third. Davis, you could see, very upset there. But now congratulating Degenkolb there.
But just about as close as you could get. John Degenkolb at the line. Just pulling it out. Number 191 for Argo Shimano wins the first sprint of this year's Vuelta. The congratulations from the rest of his team on his 7th win this season. But the biggest win of his entire campaign as he wins stage 2 of the Vuelta.
Early on, Ben Swift for Sky, the British rider, out in front. You can see on the right for Orica Greenedge, Alan Davis going, but on the left, the German Degenkolb narrowly coming by, very late there, and he almost didn't make it.
4 climbs, starting with a Cat 2, then a pair of Cat 3s, and then finishing with a Category 1.
And 96 miles is the total distance, just over 155 kilometers. That early Category 2 and those Category 3s, those are all just serving to soften up the legs of the guys before the final climb up the I-bar ascent to the Category 1, 12% maximum. It does have a little 1 mile downhill right over the top, but there's no real time to catch back up. Guys are going to...
Consecutive year, the Vuelta is starting a stage in the town of Faustino in northern Spain. And from there, heading north on today's stage number 3.
Almost due north, as the guys have already been over a Category 2 climb and a Category 3 along the way. Early breakaway, been a very aggressive day. 8 men off the front. They now face 2 final climbs of the day, the Category 3 Compazar and the final I-bar climb. That is the climb that will really settle things on the day.
After the first 2 stages, the general classification still pretty compact, and a lot of the marquee names right there with one another, just a few seconds out of the red leader's jersey. Chris Froome, Alberto Contador tied on time because yesterday Contador picked up a 2-second time bonus on the road later on in the stage. And now we are live, just over 60 kilometers left to go in the stage. 2 climbs down, 2 to go. And the gap is now just over 3 minutes from the field to our 8-man breakaway. And the field is being led by Movistar. This is the breakaway. And Philippe Gilbert, one of the most high-profile names in the break, the Belgian for BMC. He also has the best time on GC among any of the riders in the breakaway, just 10 seconds down on the overall race lead.
Yeah, very tight at the top there with Gilbert being 10 seconds down. Typically that spells certain doom for a breakaway like that has been off the front all day. But so far, Movistar has not been able to bring them back.
Movistar did all the work yesterday at the front of the field, bringing back what was just a 3-man breakaway on a much more innocuous stage. Flat, everybody felt it was going to come down to a field sprint, and that's what happened today. A little more unpredictable with all of the climbing, and especially with the summit finish at the end. But this, again, is a Vuelta in 2012, where the climbs and these tricky stages are spread out over the course of the entire 3 weeks. So it's hard to say exactly what's going to happen on a stage like today. I think you would have to believe that the big names aren't going to go full gas, but with the selection we may see, it's going to be an early indication of who has legs for the long haul.
Yeah, and I don't see any of the real favorite men for the general classification, with the exception of Rodriguez, really going for it. I don't see Contador and I don't see Froome trying to win the stage and end up in the leader's jersey unless they have the idea that they can then let the leader's jersey go again. You don't want to have your team defending from here all the way to the finish. Rodriguez, however, there's a guy who he has never seen an uphill finish he didn't like, and he may just have to go for it. I don't know that he can control himself.
Well, Contador's kind of like that too. Sometimes when he has good legs, he goes against form. He'll just attack because he's feeling good and he feels that he can take time, even though it may look like a stage where he can hold back.
Yeah, and we've seen certainly in the first 2 days of racing that Contador, even though he has said he does not feel that he has the full, quote, race rhythm in his legs, he has definitely been looking good. Jonathan Castroviejo there on the front, and he's the overall race leader, the red jersey there, but he is now helping on the chase. The reason why is because he wants one of his teammates, presumably it would be Alejandro Valverde, to ride into the red jersey of the overall leader today.
Well, he's also got JJ Cobo amongst his teammates, the defending Vuelta champion from last year.
And this finishing climb probably suiting Valverde a little bit more. Plus, Cobo lost the 4 seconds right at the end of the team time trial on day number 1. And once again, sometimes you wonder how much the teams are bluffing. Valverde says he is in Spain purely in the service of trying to help Cobo defend his win from last year. But you got to wonder if maybe they're bluffing a little bit and maybe Valverde will ultimately be their GC man.
Well, guys always follow the company line and they say the right things. Nobody's going to go into the start of a big race like this and say, you know what, I know we have a team leader, but I'm here to win too. Everybody's going to play the political correctness game, but when it comes down to fighting it out on the road, the best man typically is going to be the leader of the team.
Typically, that is the case, and sometimes it is a little bit difficult to sort out, as we saw in the Vuelta last year with Chris Froome helping Brad Wiggins, and Wiggins ultimately faltering, Froome waiting for him on the Angleroo, and that cost Froome the overall victory in the end. But nobody knew Froome was going to be that good, and even Froome didn't know it at that point.
Well, speaking of guys like Froome and Cobo here early last year at the Vuelta, when they started the stage in Faustino, which was stage 17, and that was the stage start town today. You remember it was what is now a legendary stage where Froome and Cobo went back and forth, battling up that final climb to the Peña Cabarga. The winner that day was Chris Froome. J.J. Cobo maintained his overall race lead and went on to win the Vuelta, but that was one of the best Vuelta stages we've seen in a long time. It started in Faustina, and that's where today's stage 3 started as well, just going to a different destination.
Yeah, it was really one of the best Grand Tour stages in any Grand Tour I'd seen in a long time. Stage 17 last year, and it was Chris Froome's first Grand Tour stage win. He's since picked up one in the Tour de France this year. And so, you know, coming into that final week, we should have an incredibly good bike race. After 2 weeks are already in the rearview mirror, I think that it's going to be a royal battle in the top of the general classification this year.
All right, so the table is set. 8-man breakaway with a lead of just over 3 minutes. Right around 60K to go here to the first summit finish of the race. Come back to the front end of the main field. Movistar followed by Rabobank. That is the Movistar squad. And this is the profile for today's stage number 3, just over 155 kilometers. The red line is where the riders are right now, so they have 2 climbs in the bank, 2 more still to go, 1 Cap 3, and then the Cat 1 summit finish at the very end.
Movistar driving the front right now, and this has been a very tough day already, which means that the final climb is going to be more selective than if they had taken it a little bit easy. That 8-rider group with Philippe Gilbert off the front, he's only 10 seconds down, and so the field has not been able to relax. They've had to chase hard.
And remember, there are time bonuses at the finish, 12, 8, and 4 seconds for the first 3 across the line, so the red jersey is certainly in play today, even though it's being worn by Jonathan Castroviejo, who took it after the team time trial win for Movistar on Saturday and stage 1 of this Vuelta, as we are back up now with our 8-man breakaway. So how about an 8-man group here on a stage with 2 climbs left to go? Their lead is now down to just about 2.5 minutes with under 50K remaining. How strong of a chance do you give this break of taking it all the way home?
Not a very strong chance, Steve. Unfortunately, the field has not given them the time they would have liked to have had, but they all had to know that they weren't going to get much lease because the general classification battle is still so tight. With Gilbert being 10 seconds down, it doesn't give those guys much option. And there's several guys in the front group that are right around a minute as well. So the field's never going to let them get much time, and that's what they would have needed to really have a decent shot.
Every year at the Tour of the Basque Country, this stage that ends with the I-bar climb is always the signature stage of the race. And typically whoever wins this stage goes on to win the overall Tour of the Basque Country title. We saw Alberto Contador do it back in 2009. We've seen Sammy Sanchez do it. And the key feature there is the fact that it comes later on in the race, but here it is only on stage number 3 of the Vuelta, so guys still have fresh legs. They're all still pretty motivated, so how does that play into the overall dynamic when you have guys who are still relatively fresh compared to maybe having this stage at a different point?
Well, I think one of the main things is that some of the real favorites, Contador, Froome in particular, those guys are going to be more interested in marking on the climb than trying to gain time and get in the leader's jersey if they get the stage win. And so I think that's going to be the major change. If this race were just another 5 or 6 days in, I would really put a lot more stake in a guy like Contador going for it because he's explosive. It's a perfect type of a climb for him. But I honestly don't think he wants the pressure of the overall leader's jersey this early in the race. And I think that there's a much better chance that you'll get a guy like Valverde or Antone. And Antone is going to be a tough call because his team lost some time in the team time trial. So Valverde is the likely candidate to inherit the leader's jersey today.
For a guy like Antone, he's a Basque rider on a Basque team, and this is probably the most iconic Basque climb in the Basque country. So it would be at least symbolic for him to win today, and it would certainly be good promotional value for his team if he can win atop the I-bar later on in the next 44.5K.
I completely agree. Antone is a guy that should pull out all the stops on today's finish, and especially because he's been the race leader in the Vuelta before, and he's crashed out while in the leader's jersey a couple of seasons ago. And so what a great thing for him to do, to win on this stage if he could and pull back on the red race leader's jersey. I don't see him as one of the very top favorites for the overall classification come Madrid, but he's one of the second-tier guys. If things go perfect for him, maybe he could win. I don't see it happening, but some time in red, that would be great.
Well, earlier this spring at the Tour of the Basque Country on the I-bar climb, Sammy Sanchez won for the third consecutive year, but who was second on that day? Joaquim Rodriguez. Chris Horner, who's not in this race, was third. Bok Mollema and Damiano Cunego rounded out the top five. Mollema and Cunego are both in the Vuelta, obviously along with Joaquim Rodriguez. So you have three guys who were in the top five on the I-bar climb at this year's Tour of the Basque Country who are in the Vuelta racing today.
That was several months ago, back in April, that they raced the Tour of the Basque Country. So that was as their season was a lot fresher and the legs were a lot fresher as well as the mind. But you can see on the front here, this looks like Pablo Lastras on the front riding a lot of tempo. He does a lot of this for his team. He's a very valuable domestique. They do not want that group, that 8-rider group, to get much time. And most of the time, they've been in that 3 to 4 minute range off the front. And now it's come down to under 3. So it still looks very good for the field to bring those guys back.
All right, so they still have a Category 3 before that final climb to I-bar and the summit finish. And overall, the 8-man breakaway with a lead of 2.5 minutes and just under 43K left to go. And for the second straight day, Movistar has taken up the responsibility of leading the field. And the gap once again coming back down. We didn't see Movistar relinquish the front of the field until very late in yesterday's stage when some of the sprinters teams came forward, and then it was rapid fire. Different teams coming to the front, left and right. But today, a much different sort of narrative with the summit finish as opposed to a flat field sprint like we saw on stage 2.
We'll see a very much a selection on today's race. The gaps will not be big amongst the contenders, but some guys will lose significant time. And certainly, if you're a contender, this is a nerve-wracking type of day. You have not yet had an opportunity to really test yourself in the mountains against the competition. And so you don't know who's going great and who is not going great. And so this is a bit of a challenging day for the general classification guys.
It's also a psychological day too, though, because you have to believe with somebody like Contador, who is such a big favorite, and even Chris Froome, who has to be put up there alongside Contador as one of the legitimate top favorites. You never want to be behind those guys in the GC, even though it's still a long way to go with a lot of climbing. If you find yourself behind them numerically on the standings, that's tough to mentally get your head around, knowing that it's going to be hard to bring them back.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle, literally, to try and get that lead or those seconds back from those guys. And so you're absolutely right. Everybody knows that this is going to be a really tough Vuelta. There are 10 uphill finishes. 7 of those are called summit finishes, and then 3 more are just smaller climbs that are not big enough to actually call a summit, like a mountain summit finish. But it's going to be an extremely selective race with those 10 uphill finishes.
With the Vuelta, our leaders are within a kilometer of the summit of the Category 3 climb. And their gap is now back down under 3 minutes to this main field. And the type of climb that's one you can ride in the saddle, under 5%, not terribly long, 6K altogether.
Yeah, this type of a climb with this grade and this large road, you can see just how the pack just motors right up it. There's still a fast enough pace that there's a pretty decent amount of draft. And so the field, though, there are going to be some guys who are struggling. You can see some getting spit out the back. For the most part, they're all going to hang together. And look at this up here. Big ring over the top for Dominique Roland in the breakaway, the Canadian.
As the riders hit the summit of the Category 3 climb. So that leaves them with 35K left to go to the finish, and one more climb still to come, the I-bar at the end. As Irizar there for Radio Shack Nissan off the front, as guys will now look to come back together after the sprint for the top and the King of the Mountains points. Earlier, it was the rider from the Netherlands, Pim Lichtart, who was getting the King of the Mountains max time and points at the earlier climbs. And the field here still spread out and on their way to the summit of the climb.
Really moving at a high rate of speed. You can see it does not look a whole lot like a climb, just because they've got such a nice wide road, and it's, as we said, just under 5%, so they can roll right along. This is Philippe Gilbert at the front with a hand up. Means he wants his car to come up there and possibly to discuss things, or it might just be to get some liquids and or food for the end of the race. And they're allowed to feed from the car up until 20 kilometers to go. Not in the first 50 kilometers and not in the final 20.
And on roads like this, it makes it so easy. Look how well paved it is. It's wide. It's not like a climb we might see in France or Italy where it's very narrow and twisting and it's more delicate. Here it's relatively easy.
Yeah, especially when you're in a breakaway. Now here's another interesting thing. The rules state you're not allowed to feed on a downhill. When's the last time you actually saw that rule enforced? Probably never. And so the driver of the car, they just know when it's okay to go up to the rider and when it's not. The riders often feed on downhills.
So Gilbert got his bottle, and away goes the breakaway with the field still going uphill. And when you're talking about 13 mountain stages at this year's Vuelta, 10 uphill finishes, this is the first of 7 summit finishes, to be able to save your energy and ride in the saddle in the draft like this over one of the climbs out on the road, that means a lot in the overall picture of saving energy throughout the race for these guys here.
No doubt. You got 3 weeks of racing, just over 2,000 miles, a lot of climbs. And the more you can save early, the better you're going to be late. So 2:37 as the peloton comes over the top of the penultimate climb behind the break.
All right, 2.5 minutes it is. 30. This is Movistar leading the field on the descent of the Category 3 climb. Our 8-man breakaway is under 30K left to go to the finish. 3 climbs down, 1 to go. Just the I-bar summit finish coming up at the end. That climb will start with 7.5 kilometers to go to the end of the stage, and it will actually summit with still 2K left to go. So there's a little bit of flat and downhill to the actual finish line, although they are officially classifying it as a summit finish.
Yeah, in that little flat and downhill to the finish, there are also a couple little turns. And so it always, what we tend to see is a couple of guys just jumping. One guy jumps early, and it's not a real true sprint. It's like you just have to have the right position into that final corner.
Movistar followed by Team Sky at the front. Rabobank is there as well. Some of the natural breakup on a descent occurring behind them in the field. Today's stage relatively short at just over 155 kilometers. There are no stages at this year's Vuelta over 200K. There's so much climbing that they're keeping the distances relatively short. The inaugural Vuelta, way back in 1935, featured 50 riders averaging 240K per day for 14 stages. That's 150 miles a day. Kind of like doing Paris-Roubaix every single day for 14 days. And well, things have changed just slightly over the years.
And the riders are actually quite happy that they don't have to do races that long every single day. However, Movistar, these guys on the front working, are probably not super happy right now. They have had to chase really hard. Every time we see the breakaway of 8, it's working very well together. And so this Movistar team has had a lot of work to do today.
Our leaders through Elorio.
This will be tight with the peloton right through here. These are those situations where the team directors in the car will be yelling at all their teammates in their ears, their riders, saying, be careful as you come into town here. It's very narrow. And everybody will be trying to get to the front, and it'll be hectic in the peloton.
The Basilica from the 1400s. In the town of Eloria, the Basilica de la Purissima. The tower itself, built back in 1672, one of the many hilltop towns and cathedrals that dot this landscape in northern Spain. As the field now just over 3 hours in, under 30K from the finish, and still Movistar at the front in control. That's not always an easy situation when you're a team like Movistar, and they know what's going to unfold. They know they're doing all the work, and they know once they get to that final climb, a lot of guys on that team are going to be hurt, and the other squads are going to attack with fresh legs, and there's nothing they can do about it.
There's nothing they can do. It's just bike racing. It's the way it works. If you have the top 6 or 7 places in the general classification, no one's got any motivation to help you. At 2:27 is what the breakaway is now seeing on the board there.
So still a ways away from that final climb.
We haven't seen a lot of change in that time gap. I mean, it's gone up, it's come back down, but still, now with 27K to go, 2:27, not out of the question that someone from the break will survive, but still pretty unlikely.
You still got 8 guys, so anytime you have numbers like that, it always makes it that much more difficult for the field.
That's right. That's right. More guys up in the front. That means there are more guys to share that workload. And you don't have 8 guys from Movistar on the front working because they're saving several guys for the end.
Well, that final climb will hit a maximum of 12%, so certainly the most difficult of the 4 climbs on the stage today.
Yeah, no doubt. That climb separates people out quite a bit, and this is what we were talking about just a moment ago, how when the field gets here, narrow roads, almost room for, what, maybe 3 abreast through there, nowhere to move up whatsoever. If somebody makes a mistake, it's a total traffic jam in the race.
The group of 8 had a lead at one point of 4.5 minutes, now down to 6 here. And when they went through the last intermediate sprint, it was 1.5 minutes back to the main field, but the pace has really picked up in that peloton as Movistar has relinquished duties at the front to the likes of Saxo Bank, Sky, and Omega Pharma Quickstep.
This is Ligtart coming back from the breakaway. He's talking in his radio right there. Let his team director and his team know that he's no longer in the break, and he will now help them out as much as he can if he has anything left in his legs to set them up for the final climb. He's handing a bottle back there, so teammate will grab that. It's much easier for a guy who's been in the break all day to have a bottle, and he can hand it off to a teammate in a prime position.
Gilbert back to the front of this breakaway now with 15.5 kilometers left to go.
It just still boggles the mind that Gilbert has not won a race all year. I mean, he was on fire the last 2 seasons, seemingly winning at will very often, and he has been shut out.
Nico Siemens is the rider here for Cofidis in the red and white at the 15K to go banner, who's off the back as, well, the gap has now come down to under a minute.
This looks like Tony Martin, for it is indeed Tony Martin. Omega Pharma Quickstep on the front as he keeps the pace nice and high. This is all about positioning at this point. They've got that intermediate sprint coming up. Too many guys off the front to pick up any of those time bonus seconds for the top 3 spots at the intermediate sprint from the peloton, but they need to be in good position for the final climb.
And sometimes the fight for position going into the final climb of the day is often more ferocious than the climb itself, because the high rate of speed, the close quarters between riders, and just trying to get to where you want to be near the front at the base of the final climb, that's where a lot of the action takes place. So under 14K left to go. An intermediate sprint and a climb still on the menu here for the closing portion of stage number 3. 11.5 kilometers remaining. Team Sky at the front of the field, a blistering pace in pursuit of what is now just a 6-man breakaway. They are coming up on the final intermediate sprint at 11.3K left to go in the town of Ibar. And it's now just 20 seconds from this field to the breakaway, which is on the left.
Breakaway holding on for grim death right now, but Gilbert looks like he's going to get the intermediate sprint uncontested there. Irizar second, Zeitz unofficially third, but the field is about to swallow them up, and the huge battle up to the Arate summit lies just ahead.
The climb will start with 7.5 kilometers left to go in the stage. Here comes the peloton. Sky setting the tempo. Under 20 seconds back, so they are right on their heels now.
Juan Antonio Flecha, the Argentinian-born Spanish citizen on the front. Look at all the Sky men there. I just saw guys riding up on the sidewalk. This is narrow. There's a lot of chaos right now, and Froome has his men on the front right where he needs them.
And again, it's always so difficult, can be chaotic when you're trying to position riders for the start of a climb. That's why the pace is so high right now, and Sky is at the front. They are in the town of Ibar, a city that's hosted a Vuelta finish 4 different times. The climb has been only used twice before in the Vuelta. That was 1974, and before that in 1972. So today is only the 3rd time that the iconic Ibar climb has been used as a summit finish for a stage of the Vuelta.
I can tell you what, we're going to see some fireworks. Look at the nerves in this peloton. It is really dialed up here. They're going to hit the bottom of the climb. The official start was 7.5 kilometers to go. So they still have a little way through the town here, but these roads are narrow. It's very hard to move up right now if you're in the peloton with Sky on the front drilling it. You notice the breakaway just hopping over some speed bumps. These are really sketchy moments in the peloton.
Look at the parked cars, too.
Everywhere. I mean, these are not big roads. This is very nervous in the peloton. There could easily be some crashes.
But they are just flying. Check out this tight turn here. I mean, you go from the wide roads we saw out in the open landscape to now this, twisting and turning, parked cars, trash cans, barriers.
Yeah, these are the moments you're very happy to be in the breakaway, even though they know they're going to get caught as they just went over another speed bump. It's just so much safer in the break at this point. This is Danny Pate, the American, on the front for Sky.
Saxo Bank just behind Sky, then Omega Pharma Quickstep. These are our leaders.
Sergio Carrasco, the Andalucia rider, on the front. He spent his entire team with the Andalucia squad. Irizar now coming through. These guys trying to hold on here, but there's no way they can stay away at this point. Look at the peloton.
Field. The field is right there at the 9K banner. They're going to be caught. Well, that was quick. So the Ibar climb coming up. It'll officially start with 7.5 kilometers left to go. Average just under 8%, and will max out at 12%. And that part comes with 4.5 kilometers left to go to the finish of the stage. This is Irizar of Radio Shack Nissan just dangling off the front. Everybody else has been swallowed up, and he's about to be gobbled as well.
Remember just how hectic these run-ins to these climbs are, as Igor Anton, the race leader, 2 years ago crashed in one of these battles for position into a summit finish.
Monday crowd out in Ibar. More fans up near the summit of the climb as well. Now they are motoring even through these very narrow old city streets. And now Irizar is about to give it up here with 8K left.
Well, to start out the climb, they make a left-hand hairpin corner. And things will really start to happen.
All right, so everybody from the breakaway has been brought back. This is the front on stage 3, and we are commercial-free. Brought to you by Got Chocolate Milk the rest of the way. As they start the I-bar climb up to the first of 7 summit finishes at this year's Vuelta a Espana. Sunny, hot day in northern Spain's Basque Country, and one of the landmark climbs of this region, used every year at the Tour of the Basque Country, and now being used for just the 3rd time in the Vuelta a Espana, and the first time since the 1970s. And Team Sky at the front. In the white jersey, it's Ian Stannard leading the way, the British national road champion. Now the rider from Omega Pharma Quick-Step here with the surge. Now just off the front with 7K now left to go, so they are on the lower slopes of the climb.
Well, this thing's still very much being controlled right behind our solo leader at this point by Team Sky.
And now
actually not, it's Saxo Bank.
Saxo Bank now coming to the front. And the Omega Pharma rider is just about to be scooped up here, so that didn't go far. Now Saxo Bank for the first time coming to the front, riding for Alberto Contador.
Well, things certainly start out on this climb a little bit less steep, but they get steeper right around the corner here, and they're going to get up to just about 10% grade, and it's going to stay there for a long time and then get just a little bit steeper.
Now remember, Contador won on this climb at the Tour of the Basque Country back in 2009. It was a solo move. He broke from the field with 5K left to go and then rode in well ahead of the rest of the field. Went on to win the Tour of the Basque Country that year, and right now he is second from the front here as they start this climb.
Let's see if Contador goes big on this one. Remember, he comes in just 12 seconds down in the general classification, but more importantly, tied on time with Chris Froome, who really has to be considered his major competitor. Froome, by the way, is lined up right on Contador's wheel right now.
So Sky did the work leading into the climb. They've pulled off, and now it's just Froome behind Contador, who's behind one of his teammates at the very front. And then Joaquin Rodriguez is behind him for Katusha. So we have our 3 top high-profile GC riders in Contador, Froome, and Rodriguez, right there near the front in the first 5.
Right behind Rodriguez, his chief lieutenant, Danny Moreno. And Moreno is very well suited to help out his team leader. You don't expect to see Contador going for it quite this early, neither nor Froome. I think those guys are going to mark each other.
Igor Anton in the orange, a few wheels back, the Basque rider on this Basque Euskaltel team.
Contador's teammates starting to really suffer. And I really don't think that we're going to see Contador attacking quite this early.
I caught a glimpse of Andrew Talansky of Garmin Sharp as well near the front.
Talansky trying to put the horrible team time trial effects of the crash for that team behind him and just say, look, it's 3 weeks. Let's look forward. All right, Contador's teammate is gone.
So now Contador looks over at Froome.
And it's the waiting game as they all look at each other. Who's going to come to the front?
And Froome's going to have a teammate come up alongside Contador here. And then Contador gets a teammate back. And this is Jonathan Castroviejo. Our overall leader has been shot out the back. So it looks like we'll have a new red jersey holder by the end of the day.
That's no real surprise to him or really his teammates either. He knew that today was a day that didn't suit him. That's why he did some chasing earlier on. Look at how thinned out this peloton is. Only the third day of 21 days of racing.
Well, again, this is the fourth climb of the day. They've gone over Cat 2, 2 Cat 3s, and now this is the first Category 1 climb of this year's Vuelta.
Is he off the back? Indeed he is. Cobo has been shed, last year's winner.
Well, that's the big news right now. J.J. Cobo not able to hang with the front group. Our defending champion, who lost 4 seconds on the first day, even though his team won the team time trial, now struggling with the first serious mountain day of this year's race.
Cobo's not an explosive climber, so this is going to be a harsh reality for him, as it is for a lot of guys today. But still, Cobo getting dropped, that's big and bad news for him and his team.
So it looks like we have Tendam for Rabobank at the front, followed by Valverde of Movistar, Sergio Henao, and then Chris Froome of Team Sky. Contador is right behind them. Then Joaquim Rodriguez for Katusha. Looks like Async and Bok Mollema are also in this group for Rabobank. They're near the back. Igor Anton is in there for Euskaltel. Thomas de Hent for Vacan Soleil. Still a pretty big group.
And there goes Valverde.
Alejandro Valverde with the first big acceleration on the climb. Says he was here to ride for J.J. Cobo, but the defending champion is struggling, so Valverde takes matters into his own hands.
It's a perfect opportunity for Valverde to go for it. Remember, he's tied on time for the lead. Contador now coming up with Rodriguez and Froome. Froome looking like he's maybe not feeling great. Contador firing a little bit.
So Alberto Contador now at the front with the acceleration. Valverde right on his wheel. Rodriguez, then Froome, and it looks like it might be a group of 4 here, unless the others slowly reel them in. So Contador sits up. Maybe just a tester.
And I think Valverde is the guy that has the most leeway of these 4. I think they're more likely to let him go than any of the others, because I don't think they rate him as big a danger.
Igor Anton is leading the second group. He's in the orange for Euskaltel. You didn't think it was going to be a GC battle coming in? I think maybe this is just a precursor for things to come. Now these guys aren't taking any chances. We have 4.5 kilometers left to go.
Well, they have to mark each other. That's the thing. If we see a guy who's not great in the overall, and there goes Contador.
Attacking again. Another big surge by Alberto Contador. Joaquim Rodriguez is right on his wheel. And then it's Valverde. Froome losing contact.
Well, Froome still trying to ride into this Grand Tour a little bit. Contador said that he was going to have to ride into it as well, but he's looking pretty good.
All right, so Froome is back there now. So that's 2 accelerations from Alberto Contador.
And these are the games that are played in professional cycling. Guys testing out. And that's Talansky right at the back there. And this is that group that's being led by Igor Anton. Right behind the 4 leaders, you can see him just a few seconds up the road.
4K left to go. So Talansky at the very tail end of this group. That's Eros Kopecky. He's right behind for Liquigas in the green and white. And now we're back to the front, and other riders rejoining here. Day. 3.5K left to go.
And this is Rigoberto Urán on the front, another one of the Colombian strongmen on the Sky squad. Right behind him, Froome. Valverde is there.
Well, Urán, the Olympic road race silver medalist, and just a wrong head turn away from a potential gold in London a few weeks ago.
It was like time stopped as he looked to the left and Vino jumped to the right.
So he is pacing Chris Froome on the climb. Contador moving up on the left-hand side, his 3rd big surge. Contador attacking once again with 3.5K left.
And Rodriguez once again marking, Valverde marking as well, but Froome still not looking as sprightly as some of these other guys.
Well, surge after surge really will take its toll, and look at this corridor of fans. Just over 3K to the finish. That is just over a kilometer to the summit. So Antone has made it up. 3K left to go. It's Tomas Marcinski of Vacan Soleil at the back.
Antone now coming to the front here as he has done a lot of work to close down some gaps today.
Well, Igor Antone has won on some iconic climbs throughout Europe, and he would love to win today in front of the home Basque fans, and here he goes. Contador, though, responding on the left-hand side. He's going to go right by Antone.
Well, this has turned into a real battle, and Contador once again being marked by Valverde and Rodriguez. Froome struggling to close down the gap a little bit.
Are you kidding? Contador said he wasn't going to be his best in week number 1. He was going to ride into this race. This is his 4th acceleration on this climb alone.
And he really wants to get some time over Froome. He keeps looking back. That's the danger, man. Froome can climb and he can time trial.
Rodriguez, Valverde, and Froome right there with Contador. With another surge. Valverde there. Rodriguez. Froome is going to once again fall off the pace a bit.
Well, there's one thing that is to Froome's benefit. It's to ride steady. Every time Contador sprints away on the climb like this, he goes deep into the red. Froome kind of diesels back up to him, and it keeps him a little bit fresher. Now they're over the top of the climb. They have that little tiny bit of downhill to the finish.
Contador just relentless on this climb, where he won 3 years ago in the Tour of the Basque Country, now being used for only the 3rd time at the Vuelta, and Contador just attack after attack. Valverde and Rodriguez have held on each and every time. Froome has clawed his way back on each and every time after dropping off the pace, and now we have this select group of 4 inside of 2K to the finish, where there are time bonuses of 12, 8, and 4 seconds for the first 3 across the line. This is the next group behind them.
See, Talansky did make the split, 3rd from the back there. And this is a very good opportunity for Valverde to ride himself into the red jersey as the overall race leader.
Valverde is at the front with the blue and green for Movistar, followed by Chris Froome, who's in 2nd for Team Sky. Rodriguez is in 3rd there in the red and white of Katusha. Contador at the back, number 201 in the yellow and blue of Saxo Bank.
And these guys are playing a lot of games right now. They could get caught by the group behind.
Well, if it comes down to a sprint from the front 4, though, you gotta like Valverde, don't you?
You have to, and but right now with him sitting on the front, he's in the wrong spot, and if somebody jumps him from behind, chiefly Rodriguez would be the danger man, I think. Rodriguez could win the stage. Here comes Contador. Maybe he's attacking again? No, he's not.
Well, time bonuses for the first 3 across the line. There are 4
goes.
here, and Contador, a 5th big surge. Coming up on the final kilometer of stage number 3.
Well, he didn't get anywhere whatsoever. So we have seen Contador attacking a lot, but my, oh my, we may have quite the general classification battle if these guys stay this evenly matched throughout the next couple of weeks.
This is that second group. Igor Antone there in the middle. Now back to our leaders. Here comes Contador ahead of Valverde. This is a race for time bonuses. On stage number 3, Valverde still out front. Contador right behind him. Rodriguez goes on the inside now. Joaquim Rodriguez, Perito to the front. Half a K remaining. Rodriguez leading them in. Valverde right behind him. Contador, then Froome. 300 meters to the line. It's going to be a sprint for time bonuses and a stage win. Joaquim Rodriguez taking it all the way.
Yeah, I don't think Valverde's going to have time to get around him, Steve.
They come into the finish. Joaquim Rodriguez trying to hold off Valverde, who comes around on the side.
Ooh,
and it
that
looks
was
like
close.
Rodriguez just maybe held on ahead of Valverde.
I'm thinking maybe Valverde. It was very close. Wow.
Hard to tell. Chris Froome, though, did get third. That's the final time bonus, but it was neck and neck between Rodriguez and Valverde. Neither of them threw their arms in the air. Looks like it was almost simultaneous as Valverde came up on the side. Rodriguez was leading it out. Valverde tried to pass him on his right-hand side.
You can tell on this replay here, Valverde trying to punch it around right at the line, and, well, since we don't get to see the line, it's pretty tough to say.
Well, maybe from this view.
Very short, about 75 meters from that final corner to the finish line. Wow, that's photo finish.
Can't tell there. I mean, that is as close as possible. We're going to need the side angle, photo finish to see. Of Movistar is the new overall race leader. He also just narrowly took the stage win ahead of Joaquim Rodriguez. Let's take a look at it one more time. Just about as close as you could possibly get.
Rodriguez leading around that final corner, but Valverde coming around at the very last moment, and it really looked so close it was hard to tell without the officials and their photo finish camera. Man, it does not get much closer than that.
Red jersey stays within the Movistar team. It goes from Jonathan Castroviejo to Alejandro Valverde. We'll show you how it shakes out after this. After 3 days, Valverde is the new race leader. Beñat Inchausti slides into second place with Joaquim Rodriguez rounding out the top three. Froome and Contador both within 25 seconds. But the big loser on the day was JJ Cobo. He is over a minute back.